individual essays, acts, or individual apple trees go through stages of growth while remaining essentially an apple tree. So that's how we could explain, we're not being difficult of flower power, if the person is lucky enough to have done some metaphysics and lucky enough for me to hang around and listen to it, what they could start to explain to me is that there's an identity between the idea I have in my head and that sprout over there. That in fact, that is a stage of the reality of an apple tree. Okay? We'll look at that a bit. We'll look at that a bit later. So that allows me, once I make that distinction, it allows me to say that in the off season, this is still an apple tree. When it's dead, I say, this is a dead apple tree. There's a continuation. It's a question of identity. Okay? Say, for example, if we look around in this room. Now, everyone in this room is exactly identical in a way. Exactly identical. Do you know what that would be? What are we identical in? Exactly right. Nail on the head. Our essentia. We are human beings. All of us here are equally human beings. Alright? We don't have the superhuman category up the back. Although Dan is up there, so that might be an argument for it. And then we don't have the subhuman down here. We all fall equally into this essentia, human nature, the idea human nature. But then you're not identical in a way. In other words, it's wrong to say you're all the same in another way. But how do I say that without completely throwing out the window this idea of everyone being human? This is where the essay comes into it. All of you are a completely different essay. You're an individual instance of humanity. How do I know that? First of all, I'm standing here and you're sitting there. So very much we rely on our bodies to define us as separate examples of humanity. Okay? The reason you know you're not the person sitting next to you is for that very reason. They're sitting next to you. They're not occupying the same time and space as you. One of the big things which helps me when I wake up in the morning, I'm not much of a morning person, I'm a bit hazy in the morning. What helps me is the thing called a mirror. When I look in the mirror and I see this, I think, this is Christian, I've made it. And you see, this is big in philosophy of identity. This is a big thing. How do you know you're you? Like, say for example, I'm walking down the road after this lecture, I fall over and hit my head, and I wake up thinking I'm Elvis. I actually think I am Elvis Presley. Now, you could very clearly say, Christian, notice how you've identified me, thinks he's Elvis. Why aren't I Elvis? Who are you to tell me I'm not Elvis? If I rattle off enough songs, you're going to start believing me? Well, he does know all the words to Swag Shoes. I don't know, he puts forward good argument. You're not going to say that. What you're going to say is that this is Christian, but something's gone astray. Now, what is it that's gone astray, and how do you know? The answer is it's my continued physical reality. Right? The proof that this is Christian would be that if Father Paul followed me and saw me walking, saw me fall over, saw me stand up, that's the consistent identity. It's my body. Because Father Paul can't see this invisible spiritual thing floating around Christian like something out of a bad sci-fi movie. He just sees this body. But he knows that that body is Christian. It doesn't just manifest this invisible thing behind him that just happened to become Elvis, and Elvis is reincarnated. When he sees my body, he sees Christian. You know, this is a huge point. I can't emphasize this enough, especially when it comes to our morality. We've become real big jewelers. You know, you'll see me. I might have 30 scotches in one night, and then go and sleep with 4 women, and then I'll tell you the next day, you don't know me, don't judge me. You know, you don't know the real me. And so in my mind, I've distinguished this body thing and what I do with that versus this invisible inside interior Christian that no one really sees, but I know is a really good person. And so we've created a dualism between my body and my actions and who I think I really am as this invisible soul thing. Okay? So this means if we take the example, I'm going to pick on Rita. No one does that around here, so it's about time someone did. Let's say, for example, I recognise that as Rita. And let's rewind the clock back. Right? Imagine us going back in time and we're watching Rita, this same physical being, getting younger and younger, until eventually we see a photo of Rita in high school. We say, look, that's Rita. Hey, that's Rita. Why? Because well, that's the same physical being. That's the same essay as Rita. It's the same individual act of existence as Rita. So we go back younger. And we get to primary school. Now, at primary school, Rita's this big, but we say, hey, that's Rita. And we laugh. Rita said nothing's changed. So Rita's this big, and we say, hey, that's Rita, because we see a continued physical reality, a continued essay. Now, a dualist might say this. Hang on a second, Christian. The Rita I know has an IQ of 160. How smart is your primary school kid here? Because if they don't have an IQ of 160, guess what? That's not Rita. Now notice how what they say seems to make sense. Oh my gosh, Rita does have an IQ of 160, and this primary school kid doesn't. What am I going to do? That's because they've taken the question of identity away from her physical identity, started talking about this invisible thing called IQ. What they've done is made that distinction, they've made an artificial distinction between the invisible intelligence and the physical body of Rita. And once we do that, we can't answer that question. Okay? It's like going back to, can I call it an apple tree if I don't see an apple on it? That's what they've done with our example of Rita. But we know that what sustains us as individuals, what individuates us, what makes us an example of human nature, is the fact that we are individually sitting in different places. So we keep winding back the clock through until we have a newborn baby, and because we see this continued physical existence through time, we can say, hey, that's Rita, that's actually Rita, you know? Now, say for example, if we lost track of her somewhere between primary school and being a baby, and we see Rita go behind the black curtain and come out, all of a sudden we could say, hey, I don't know if that's Rita. Now, it's not because that, this baby cries louder than Rita, so this isn't Rita. It's because what we've lost is that continued sense of the physical reality. I don't know if that's the same physical thing that Rita is. But as long as we don't lose track of that, we can say, hey, that's Rita. Okay? Wind it back further. Okay? Now, we cross simply a matter of location. Okay? Now, that new location is inside the mother's womb. She's 30 days younger than she was last time we looked, and we've just put her inside her mother's womb. We can say, hey, that's Rita. But the only reason we can say it is because there's a continued essay, a continued individual body, an example of humanity. Okay? Hopefully you can start to piece together how what we rely on is that continued physical. Once we start becoming dualists, you get to dead ends that you'll never answer. You can never answer it. Because if Rita learns something tomorrow that she didn't know today, is she suddenly completely different person. No, it wouldn't be right to say that. You know, we might say there's been a development. She's grown in a way, but we couldn't say it's a different person. We can't depend on these invisible things as identity points. Now, what we realise then very quickly is that the same identity, the same existence, goes through stages, it goes through changes. It's actually part of the nature of being created is change. If you're not God, guess what? You change. And so to hold a creature, to say that it's constantly turning into something different as it changes, collapses our whole understanding of reality. You know? And now, look, some people might like the idea of that. They might like the idea that my wife just got half of her hair cut off. I don't think that's my wife. That doesn't look like my wife. But we would say, listen, mate, you're obviously trying to get out of something. You know, who are you fooling? Who are you fooling? Seriously. Your wife's never got a haircut before? What, you've never seen these things? You've never seen a baby apple tree before? You know? So this is what we call in philosophy the esse-essentia distinction. On the left here we've got individual, concrete, real examples of apple trees. And on the right we've got our idea of an apple tree. Okay? Now what this allows us to do is to see how this fits into this without actually having to show an apple. So what we're looking at right now is really the crunch point between our intellect and the outside world. It's really, what we're talking about now is really profound stuff which changes, helps us understand the whole way we understand reality. Say we go back further. Say someone says, well, Christian, how far back are you willing to take this thing with Rita? Are you willing to go back to the spoon and the egg? You know, this seems to be a question which pops up because people are often willing to see that there's a continued physical existence, but they'll say, when do we draw the line? Now, this is where we have to go just one step deeper to help clarify exactly what we're talking about here. Now, each of these things here are individual acts of existence, right? But notice how I said already that everything changes. Because we're created, we're in a constant state of change. But we don't all change in the same way. Okay? So what I might say is that an essentia is a way of developing, a way of changing. Okay? If I was to suddenly sprout an apple out of my hand, everyone's going to freak out. Because you understand that the essentia, the way of developing of a human being, does not involve producing apples. Okay? At the same time, there hasn't been any examples of a human being giving birth to a dog or a cat. Because what we understand is that what this particular essay is, because it already is, in another sense, that essentia, we can anticipate the way it acts. Okay? Now, the essentia of a sperm is simply that. It's simply to be a reproductive cell. A really good sperm doesn't suddenly make into a human being. A really good sperm just is a good sperm. It's reached its fulfillment. It's changed in a way which it can't develop further. It simply is what it is. You know, it's like saying a really good human being suddenly doesn't just fly wings and fly away into the clouds and say, well, Father Paul really made it big time. Good on you, Father. We'd freak out. We'd say, what the hell, you just grew wings? So we understand that when something is really good at being what it is, it doesn't make it something else. It reveals, in fact, what it has been the whole time. So a sperm has no more potential in its current state to be anything else. It's going to require some external involvement, some substantial change in what it is. Okay? Now, that substantial change in what it is when it takes on a new structure, or in philosophy we might say it takes on a new purpose. It takes on a new purpose. Suddenly, it's moving and changing towards something else. And now once that happens, once it starts acting in a different way, we can't keep calling it the same thing. We have to say, well, hang on, there's something else is going on here. To come back to another example, say I've got a ball of wax. Now a really, really good ball of wax doesn't make itself a candle. It will always just stay a ball of wax. It requires an external force to change what it is by sticking a string through it, and then suddenly it's a candle. Okay? But from the moment, we might say that from the moment that string enters the wax, I have officially made a candle. Might be a very bad one, but it comes within the category candle. I'm not going to say, no, Christian, actually, that's a ball of wax with string in it. I would say, yes, that's what we call a candle. Okay? We're not looking for how far in the string is. We're not looking for how big the wax is. What we recognise is a purpose, that string and that wax is for the purpose of light. So, and this is where, again, we'll look at this a bit later, because I think this is where our biologists really can answer this question finally for us. Okay, so we've got another example there of individual human beings and how they're all in that ascension. After we've, as philosophers, have dealt with the question of what is change, what is identity, what does it mean to be something, we've worked it out. Then we simply need to go to our biologists. And I like the way Robert P. George put it. As philosophers, we can tell our biologists what we're looking for. What we would say is a new human individual, in other words, a new human essay, a particular act of existing, comes into existence when there is a single, unified, and self-integrated biological system. Okay? Now, an important thing to stop us from falling back into our dualism mistake. Notice how I've said here that it's single, it's a unity. Now, without getting complex, how can things be a unity? There's a number of ways that something can be one. One of those ways is for their parts to work in a unified manner towards one purpose. Okay? So say, for example, if what you're looking at here is one human body. How can you tell that? Well, it seems that all the parts are coordinating to achieve one purpose, and that's speaking to you. But say as I'm talking, my arm just pops off and starts going off over here. You would say, hang on a second, this arm's got a life of its own. Why? Because it seems to be acting in a way apart from the unified Christian. Now, what we call that unifying element in Catholic philosophy and theology is the soul. The soul is the form of the body, we say. Now that's a profound moment, because that means that there is no such thing as matter, or just physical stuff, acting randomly and waiting to get at the soul. In fact, that acting is already evidence of the soul. It's what binds those parts together to make it something different, to move it towards something. Now that principle of self-movement, another phrase you might call a soul, the principle of self-movement, is in the beginning already intellectual in the sense that it's moving towards that fulfillment. Okay? Remember, we never want to identify something